At 4:41 in the morning, a Boeing 737 approaching a Russian airport suddenly pulled up for a go-around, but within seconds, the aircraft pitched violently downward. Inside the cockpit, the first officer shouted one final warning. "Pull up! Pull up!" Less than a minute later, the aircraft slammed into the ground at over 600 kilometers per hour, killing everyone on board. What happened in those final 59 seconds? How could a normal go-round, one of the safest maneuvers in aviation, turn into a catastrophic dive? Tonight, we uncover the chilling final moments of Flydubai Flight 981 and the invisible illusion that may have fooled an experienced pilot.
This video was created using CapCut AI video generator. You want to try it? Just click the link in the description.
On this anniversary of March 18th, we honor the 62 souls aboard Flydubai Flight 981, the crew and passengers whose lives were tragically lost, yet whose memory continues to inspire respect and remembrance. The evening of March 18th, 2016, started like any other night shift at Dubai International Airport. Around 8:45 p.m., a Flydubai crew gathered in the airline's crew room. 2 pilots, 5 cabin crew members. Their mission was simple: fly from Dubai to Rostov on Don, a city in southern Russia, then turn around and fly back to Dubai. The departure time was 9:45 p.m. If everything went according to plan, they would land in Russia a little after 2 a.m. and be back in Dubai shortly after sunrise. It was a long overnight flight, happening during the window of circadian low, the time of night when the human body naturally wants to sleep. But fatigue wasn't their biggest concern. When the pilots reviewed their briefing documents, they noticed the weather forecast for Rostov, and it didn't look good. A cold front was moving through the region. Strong winds were expected. Rain showers were likely. Thunderstorms were possible. Gusty winds meant the risk of wind shear, one of the most dangerous weather phenomena for aircraft during landing. Rostov-on-Don Airport already had a reputation among pilots. Approaches there could be tricky. The runway used a shallower glide slope than normal. Strong winds often created turbulence and wind shear near the ground. Because of these difficulties, the airport was classified as a captain-only airport, meaning only the captain could perform the landing. The 2 pilots discussed the weather carefully, but according to the forecast, conditions were still above the minimum required limits. If things got worse, they had alternate airports available. And thanks to a company decision, they would also be carrying extra fuel. Fuel in Russia was more expensive, so Flydubai asked the crew to fill the tanks in Dubai, a practice called fuel tankering. This meant the aircraft would carry far more fuel than necessary, giving the crew extra time and options if the weather forced delays. Ironically, this extra fuel would later allow them to stay near the airport longer than most crews might have. The captain was 38 years old, with nearly 6,000 hours of flying experience, mostly on the Boeing 737. He had only recently become a captain with just over 1,000 hours in command. The first officer was 37 years old, with about 5,800 flight hours, but far less experience on the Boeing 737. The 2 pilots had never flown together before. After briefing the cabin crew, the pilots waited for their aircraft, which arrived about 40 minutes late. Eventually, passengers boarded, 55 people in total. The aircraft's final takeoff weight was around 68 tons. At 10:20 p.m., the aircraft pushed back from the gate. 17 minutes later, Flydubai Flight 981 lifted off from Dubai and climbed smoothly to 36,000 feet. The night flight toward Russia had begun. For the next several hours, everything was routine. The aircraft cruised quietly through the dark sky, but as they approached Russia, the crew requested updated weather information from air traffic control. The controller reported winds around 17 knots, gusting close to 30 knots. Visibility was about 5 kilometers in rain showers. Not ideal, but still manageable. Then the controller mentioned something new. A SIGMET, a critical weather warning, had been issued. It warned of severe turbulence from the surface up to 15,000 feet. The pilots had not seen this warning in their earlier briefing. Still, no other aircraft had reported severe turbulence yet. The crew prepared for the approach, and they carefully reviewed wind shear procedures, just in case. Around 2:40 a.m., the aircraft began descending toward Rostov-on-Don. Clouds surrounded the aircraft. Rain and turbulence shook the wings, but the approach remained stable. Landing gear down, flaps extended, speed steady. Then suddenly, as the aircraft descended, the captain spotted the runway lights ahead. They were about 7 kilometers from landing, and then a warning sounded inside the cockpit. Go around. Wind shear ahead. The first officer immediately called out, "Wind shear." The captain reacted instantly. "Wind shear. Go around." He pushed the thrust levers fully forward. The engines roared to maximum power. The aircraft climbed sharply away from the runway. The crew had executed a wind shear escape maneuver exactly as trained. The first attempt to land had failed. Another aircraft attempted the approach shortly after them. It also had to go around. The weather over the airport was unstable, so Flight 981 climbed and entered a holding pattern. They began circling the airport, waiting, watching the weather, and thanks to their extra fuel, they could afford to wait. Minutes passed, then nearly 2 hours passed. During that time, another aircraft attempted 3 approaches. Each time, wind shear forced it to abandon the landing. Eventually, that aircraft diverted to another airport, but the captain of Flight 981 still believed landing was possible. He had already seen the runway during the first attempt, and the weather appeared to be improving slightly. So the crew decided to try one more approach. At around 4:20 a.m., almost 2 hours after their first try, Flight 981 began descending again. The conditions were similar. Clouds, rain, turbulence. But there had been no recent wind shear reports. The aircraft intercepted the runway's instrument landing system. Landing gear extended. Flaps deployed. Everything looked normal. At 1,000 feet above the ground, the aircraft was nearly perfectly aligned with the runway. Then suddenly, a strong gust of wind struck the aircraft. The airspeed jumped rapidly. Within seconds, it increased by 15 knots. The first officer called out, "Check the speed!" The captain looked down at the instruments and immediately made a decision. Go around. The captain pressed the TOGA buttons. The engines surged to full power. The aircraft began climbing away from the runway again, but this time something subtle went wrong. During the first attempt, the captain had clearly executed a wind shear escape maneuver. Now, he had initiated a normal go-around. In the chaos of the moment, procedures began mixing together. The aircraft configuration changed. The landing gear retracted. Flaps moved. With less drag and full thrust, the aircraft accelerated rapidly. The powerful engines pushed the nose upward. The captain pushed forward on the control column to counter the pitch. But he pushed too much. Then he trimmed the aircraft forward. The aircraft accelerated even faster. The pitch angle fluctuated. The first officer noticed the problem. Keep it to 15 degrees. Nose up. For a moment, the aircraft pitched up correctly. Then, suddenly, the nose dropped sharply. Passengers and crew briefly experienced weightlessness. The aircraft entered clouds. Outside visual references disappeared. At that moment, the captain began experiencing spatial disorientation. The powerful acceleration of the aircraft can trick the human inner ear. It can create the sensation that the aircraft is pitching upward far more than it actually is. To compensate for that illusion, the captain pushed the nose down. But in reality, the aircraft was already descending. The first officer realized the danger. He shouted desperately, "Pull up! Pull up!" But the captain continued pushing forward. The aircraft pitched downward to nearly 50 degrees, nose down. Its speed passed 340 knots. The ground rushed toward them at 4:41 a.m., just 59 seconds after the go-around began. Flydubai Flight 981 slammed into the ground near the runway. All 62 people on board were killed instantly. The crash of Flydubai Flight 981 lasted less than a minute, yet the chain of events behind it had been building for hours. A long night flight, difficult weather, fatigue, and one of the most dangerous illusions a pilot can experience, spatial disorientation. In aviation, pilots are trained to trust their instruments more than their senses, because sometimes the human body can lie. Investigators later issued 26 safety recommendations, and training around the world changed after this accident. Today, pilots practice scenarios designed to prevent exactly this kind of confusion. But the story of Flight 981 remains a powerful reminder. In the cockpit of a modern airliner, surrounded by advanced technology. Sometimes the greatest challenge is not the aircraft, it is the human mind. And on that dark morning over Rostov-on-Don, that invisible illusion lasted just 59 seconds. But it was enough to change aviation history forever. If you found this story fascinating, there are many more aviation mysteries where a few seconds changed everything. And the next one might be even more unbelievable. Stay tuned.